I'm Indra, and I'd like to welcome you to the Messy Middle Matters, where my friends and I explore all the twists, turns, and challenges that arise in the messy middle of work. Hi, everyone. Today, we're talking about one of the reasons that people and teams struggle to deliver. It's their commitment to perfection. It's the fact that they get stuck on making sure that it's just right. And when they do that, sometimes they lose the forest for the trees, so to speak. While perfectionism can drive excellence, it can also stall your progress. Like one of the stories that comes to mind when I think about this is I was supporting a team and we were working on some work for the client, and the lead was like, no, we need to get this right. We need to get that right. And I turned to them and I said, Vincent, I'm like, I totally love that you are so committed to making sure that this is right for this client for all these reasons. Until we finish this particular project, we can't move on to the next one. So is this good enough? And he said, oh, okay, when you frame it that way. So today we're going to be talking about, helping people know when it's the right time to put their pencils down, so to speak, and when they should keep on holding onto them and working that solution. So today Amanda's joining me. And I know you got a lot of good stuff to say about this. As part of your craft, you help people hold on to their pencils or put them down all the time. So first and foremost, how are you today, Amanda?
I'm good. So this conversation is close to my heart, because
Of course it is.
I think of myself as a recovering perfectionist. Because it's hard when you hold yourself to such high standards, right? But it's knowing the difference between excellence and perfection and knowing
Yeah.
when to stop.
100%. I went by a similar label for a long time when I was trying to let go of my perfectionist tendencies. I called myself a failed perfectionist. And then people would look at me like oddly. I'm like, I'm acknowledging the fact that I have a hard time. And by saying it out loud, failed perfectionist, it helps me let it go. It helps
Yeah.
me let it go.
Right. Putting it out in the universe helps you like internalize it, externalize it, and just let it go.
Detach. Because
Yep.
like the reality of it is if we're thinking about, growing up in an American school, I went to public school. I think it's not all that different in private school. Amanda, I think you're a public school kid too. Yeah.
Private and public. So
Ooh, you've seen both sides. Nice.
I went to
Nice.
private school from kindergarten to eighth grade and public school after that.
Okay, so you can check me on some of this stuff. But I think that in both of those environments, if we're talking about primary schools, even we can get into universities on this, but let's stick with the one experience I think everyone has had is in primary schools and in high school. Getting things perfect was so encouraged. Like you got the perfect score, you wanted to get the perfect answer, you wanted your penmanship to be perfect. You needed to, factor that out in that math equation perfectly. Your geometry, your proof in geometry had to be perfect. Whether, your pitch on that softball team, that was overhand, it means underhand. Sorry. I'm a very visual thinker for those of you listening, and I gestured the wrong way. But I'm going to let go of my perfectionism. Getting that pitch perfect is hard. Like all those things you can imagine in your extracurriculars. Like that is so honed in the way that we get graded at school.
Oh yeah, totally. And add growing up in an Asian household to all of that. And it's like, hey, I got an A. Well, why not an A plus?
It's so true. Like these standards that get created, like they put you into a box. We're not going to discuss why those boxes exist because that's a whole nother conversation I'm happy to have, but we don't have the time for it.
No.
But they put you into these boxes, and not only do they put you into a box, they put your brain into a box too of like, and getting out of that box seems to only have one way out, which is like, I got it perfect and now I can move on. Right.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so like today we'll talk about like, the pencils down metaphor came from a lovely story. I'm going to share it because I want everyone to have access to this story when they're thinking about and communicating with their team. So the story that I heard was about somebody going to back to school night. And there were two kindergarten classes. And the person walking past that kindergarten classes noticed that one of the kindergarten classrooms had art that looked like you would see from kindergartners, and all of its spectacular glory with all the colors and all the everything. And in the other classroom, the artwork still was colorful, but it was so much more beautiful. And so the person passing by said to the teacher, "Oh my goodness, you've just got such a gifted class. They're such great artists. Like, how did that happen?" She goes, "I just know when to take their pencils away from them." Because in that scenario, they weren't overworking their work and continuing to color. They just like the children didn't recognize, and a lot of us don't recognize, when is good enough, right?
Yeah. The metaphor that comes to my mind, because I'm still on my pottery journey. I was just at the studio yesterday
Okay.
and I made this beautiful bowl. I was so proud of it. I have this video of it. It's great. And I messed with it too much. I was like, oh, like this isn't great. This isn't perfect. I tweaked, and like I didn't know at that moment. Like I had a lapse in judgment and I didn't know when to put my so-called pencils down.
But it's so true. Like you think of like from pop culture, like in Project Runway, you overworked that dress, or
Mhm.
in in Top Chef, like, oh, you had too many ideas, you needed to edit, right?
Right.
Like
You needed to edit. There's too many garnishes
your
here.
flavors
What's
are
the through
muddy.
line?
Right.
Hmm.
It becomes just like those pictures in that classroom. Things become muddy when you don't know when to put your pencils down, like literally, figuratively, metaphorically, they just get muddy. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. I think that I think we're going to I suspect we're going to go through this in two different angles. Like, one, we've touched a little bit on both of them. Like, how do you, as a practitioner, no matter what your craft is, no matter what career stage you're at, how do you know when to put your pencils down? Or what tools and tricks can you use to help you identify when you should put your pencils down? And then it's also for your team members, like whether you're in a leadership capacity or program management capacity, or you're a peer looking at your friend being like, dude, put your pencil down. And it's good enough, which it can be. Good enough can be such a it can be such a derogatory, it can, or like a negative connotation, like, oh, that's just good enough, like that's passable. But what people don't realize, and some people will do that, like they're like, oh, it's good enough, I'll take it, I'll, like, let's just move on, like. But what people don't realize, in a world that's trained us to be perfectionists, our good enough, and I'm putting that in air quotes, is often someone else's A+ work, especially if you're
Hmm.
an overachiever. Like, so
Yes.
aiming for good enough is sometimes really exceptional.
Right. Your 80% is someone's 120%. Like blows it out of the water.
So true. And I saw an article on this recently. It was relative to like the design world. Somebody posted, I think they posted on LinkedIn. Somebody was saying is that, most people are going to, the people who are receiving your work, or the recipients of your work, whether they're the business side or the end user, they're not going to understand half of the stuff that you put into it. Like, are you doing it for you, or are you doing it for what will meet their needs and their expectations of excellence, right?
Right.
So understanding that difference, which is where, I think that's where you get into feedback. That's where you get into feedback, and having that external, non-emotional person, no matter how much we like to pretend like we don't have emotions at work, we do. Having that person give an objective perspective on, like, hey, is this good enough for you? Is this good
Right.
enough to go live?
Right. Like how does this land? Right. Like let me put this out into the world.
Yeah.
How do you think it'll land for, for this audience, for this meeting, whatever the parameters are.
Yeah. And that could be something so formal as usability testing, right? Like, that's where you figure out like what's good enough, like your MVP, your minimum viable product, your minimum desirable product, whatever the latest acronym of the moment is, right? Where you might go through that formal process to figure out what's enough. You might go through some executive review where executives decide what's good enough, right? There is that. Or you find your leader, you find your peer, you find your partner to help you define like what is good enough.
Yeah, I think it's a really helpful framing, right? Of like taking a step back and defining what good enough is and aligning on what good enough is so helpful.
This is what's coming to mind, and is acceptance criteria. So for folks not familiar with acceptance criteria, so within the Agile framework, for project program management, getting stuff done management. When you before you initiate work, not only do you define what you're creating, you define the parameters that will say that it's a definition of done. So
Mm-hmm.
is it done when the code is done? Is it done when that action can be triggered by that thing? Is it done when you've applied, let's take it from a design perspective, is it done when I draw the thing and everything is laid out in the right place? Or is it done when I've actually applied the visual language to it, made sure the brand colors align and all that? Like defining that before you start work helps because at that moment in time, you're not emotionally attached to the thing you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
You're not as emotionally attached. You're a click away from that, right? It helps to define that before you start your work. And then you can always gut check yourself against that. So I love the fact that you brought that one in.
Yeah. What's top of mind for me is presentation decks, right? Presentation decks. We all love a deck. And I think being honest with yourself and being upfront before you even start, what is the purpose of this, right?
Yeah.
Is it to communicate clearly to an executive team what's going on? Or is it to, go into all of the details about what's going on with this project, all the little nuances, right? Like knowing your audience, knowing what your goals are is really important, and helpful to knowing when to stop.
Yeah. And as you're talking about decks, what came to mind is so I've spent an awful lot of time with design teams and where the world that design teams would most design teams or many, maybe let's say many designers, many design teams would love to live in is a world where everything is pixel perfect, right? Like, and literally down to the literal pixel. And why that came to mind, because you said decks and like always like the
Mm-hmm.
alignment, the fonts, I can get
Right, the
obsessed.
fonts, the graphics,
I can get obsessed over this stuff too. So, I mean, I know sometimes I say like, oh, the fonts, people who get obsessed, I can get obsessed about the fonts too. Let's be real. But part of this is also when not to let go of that, right? Sometimes that is so important, right? Like it's because sometimes pixels do matter. Sometimes, like that alignment, if, like, for example, so I've spent a lot of time in financial services, and there we're working with a lot of tables of data. A lot of that is money or numbers to multiple decimal points that are aligned that can go out. The numbers that we get back from our databases can be to the 10th, the 100th, to the 1000th. They can go it's up to 6 decimal places, depending on the number, sometimes on a row level. And what can be important is that you're decimal aligned so someone can scan that table.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, like everything, you can see everything to the left of the decimal, you can see everything to the right of the decimal, and it all lines up, and the user can read that. Now, somebody might say, "Oh, I'm just going to make it right aligned. It's so much easier." And I know technically they're all similar in the level of effort, but somebody might have just by default gone with the default alignment, and let's say that it's in that particular code framework, it's all right aligned to everything, and it might be worth going to that perfection level to get that decimal alignment because that's that important to the user. So, like, there is the time, like, you shouldn't, when somebody says it's good enough, you should really ask, like, is it good enough? Because sometimes it really will matter and it can make or break something.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point about understanding the user, right?
Yeah.
Understanding, the purpose and who is consuming this thing that you're working on, right? Because like
100%.
going back to decks, right? Is this deck for, a more casual internal audience, or is this deck for a prospective client where, first impressions matter and like it needs to look beautiful?
Or am I polishing this deck for this internal user because I know that for them, they will get distracted by the font and the color and the this and the
Right.
that and the other thing? Because there are those people, especially if I'm thinking about your CMOs of the world, right? If I'm presenting them to like, taking the time to polish that deck and spend those extra hours to make sure that all the slides align to a certain template can be worthwhile? Or am I polishing the deck because, I've created so many decks for CMO and I really value that as my craft, but it may not make sense in this scenario. Is it for me? Am I polishing the deck for me because it'll make me feel good about my work? And there is a time and a place for that. Or am I making it truly for that end recipient of whatever I'm creating?
Yeah, I think, the definition of good enough is, part of that definition is this going to meet the audience's needs or like the
Yeah.
end user's needs? Or am I just doing this for, my own internal critic?
100%. And like, let's go to some examples that are not so like visual. Like if I'm thinking about like code handoffs between software engineering teams, and I mean, I could go into copy examples and also, but I'll go with the worlds I'm most familiar with. If I'm doing code handoff to another software engineer, for software engineer A, I may not need to annotate my code because they know what's going on and I know that they're going to annotate both mine and their code when they do things. But for software, am I handing off to software engineer B? I know that they're overseas, they haven't been in the business discussions, and they might look at this particular line of code and be like, "What did you do and why did you do it that way?" Taking the time to have perfect annotations so they understand why this decision, which is non-standard, was made, and they can just move on and do their thing. Like those are two different audiences. So understanding the contextual definition of perfection is really like, or non-perfection or good, actually contextual definition of good enough is really important.
Yeah, you said copy, and what popped into my head was, I don't know if this has happened to you, but like have you have you ever spent like more time than you should have writing an email for, say an executive, and you send it off and they respond with thanks, sent from my phone?
It's so funny. Like, okay, so a bunch of things popped into my mind as you're telling the story. One, so when Amanda and I used to work together, like when there was a complex scenario and I wanted to make sure that there was alignment. So I would bring the full TPM team, technical program management team together and be like, I'm going to craft the email. I want you all to have eyes on it. Just make sure that I'm not missing anything and that we can all stand behind this because we're all going to have to support it. Amanda was known as so I was like, oh, run it through Grammarly, and then we're like, Amanda Lee was our Grammarly there, because you are so good at this. So that's one thing that came to mind.
I
The other
forgot
thing
about
that
that.
no, it was great. It was great. And the other thing that came to mind, and this helps me, it helps me get unstuck when I'm writing, like not the topic of this conversation, but it also helps me get rid of my perfection thing. I use GPT a lot. Sometimes what I'll use GPT is to kickstart my writing so I don't get obsessed over everything, or I might write it myself and then send it to GPT and say, "What's your impression of this piece of work?" Yes, it's a sycophant. Yes, it will tell me my life is wonderful, but sometimes I'll be like, "Hey, someone else wrote this email. What's your impression of it?
Yeah.
Is this appropriate for, the CEO of a startup at la da da da, or do you think that there's a better way to write this?" That's another way of using technology to help me let my letting go muscle go. And without shade, with like the only person who knows I asked that gut check is me and the GPT, and the GPT never remembers half of what I told it anyway. So
Yeah, I think practicing putting yourself in someone else's shoes,
yeah,
right, is a helpful exercise too.
yeah,
Not putting yourself and your maybe perfectionist or recovering perfectionist self into the shoes of someone receiving this email.
yeah.
But putting yourself into actually that person's shoes, that, that C-level executive is going to read this on their iPhone. Is this good enough? Yeah, I think so. Does it say what it needs to say? It doesn't need to be perfect fonts, bolded, highlighted, what formatted in the most perfect way. Like, I don't need to spend more time agonizing over this. I can use this time and energy and effort to do something else that's more productive.
Right. And then knowing when is it time to assemble TPMs. Let's write this email together. Right. Like, Or even asking at the top, hey, I pulled you all together because I think it's important for all of us to be aligned. Do you guys agree or am I overthinking this?
Right.
Great way to start the conversation because then y'all would have been by starting. I think I started the conversations every once in a while like that. Like it wouldn't be, you guys could say to me, like, Indra, you're overthinking this. I got better use for my time. I'm like, great, fantastic.
Right. This looks great. Ship it.
Right. Or you'd been like, oh, you haven't thought about this enough. There's this, and this. Like, I wasn't, well, that wouldn't be perfectionist enough. But like, sometimes you're not. Sometimes there will be the moments where you're tired, where you're exhausted, you're sick and tired of working on this. Like, it's version 7, version 12, version 31 of this deck. Like, ugh, like decks can be really tough. Um, and sometimes it's like, like you will maybe err on the other side. Be like, can I just ship it? Can I just ship it? Like you
Right.
need the gut
Right.
check to
Is
be like,
this done?
one
Like,
more.
does it communicate what it needs to communicate? Or like, do I actually really need to spend more time polishing this?
Yeah. And I think that the last place where I think we can go, where I'd like to go, is a little bit when the person asking you for the thing isn't is stuck in their perfectionism. This might be the toughest.
Mm-hmm.
Because I had a boss. I am very consistent at how I format my spreadsheets. That comes from and everyone can recognize my spreadsheets. They're like, oh, I could tell you created that one. I'm like, I know. Like I've got a signature. That's on brand for me. Another episode. But I got a branding on how I design my spreadsheets. Um, that came from working underneath a boss. She wasn't the greatest, but she was a perfectionist when it came to spreadsheets. She had a certain way that she expected things. And, you know, it's worked for me, even though I didn't care for her in general. This has worked for me. Like, but there are those leaders that will be like, no, you didn't do da 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 da. It needs to be like you chose the wrong font, you chose the wrong alignment, you chose the wrong. I get I'm grabbing onto easy visuals since we are an audio podcast, but like, there are those people who just can't let it go unless it's like pixel perfect or code perfect or like zero defect free or, like just perfectly aligned.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting that when say you are that person, right? I'm
Mhm.
not I'm not accusing anyone of being that person, but say you are that
You can
person.
say that I'm that person because everyone knows I'm not.
No, but like say you are that person who like needs everything perfect, who
Yeah.
needs who needs the deck that someone else is creating for me to have the perfect font, to have the
Yeah.
perfect alignment, to have this, that, or the other, or like whatever document it is, going in there. And because I've experienced this on the other end of just
Yeah.
having someone line by line, comment after comment, and it just becomes nitpicky.
It feels
And
micromanaging and nitpicky. Yeah.
yes, it feels micromanagey and nitpicky. And, there comes a point where the nitpicking, the comments, the feedback isn't actually making it better,
No.
but that behavior is sending the message that your work isn't good enough.
And it's undermining trust.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. That's I think so. If you are a leader who is, for whatever baggage reasons, in this scenario where you're the one who's constantly asking for perfect, I think it's worth asking why.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
think it's worth asking why. It could be because the person above them, et cetera, and it's like cascading down.
Yeah.
But the question is why.
The question is why. And if you don't have a compelling answer as to why, let's figure out how not to be that way.
Well, I think that's
I
easier said than done.
Oh, recovering perfectionist here. It is easier said than done, but I think just acknowledging that there is an impact to that.
Yeah. And I think that whether you're managing up, trying to get somebody to to adjust their behavior, or you're managing down and trying to mitigate your behavior from cascading down, right? Like in either case, leadership has a perfection. I think in both scenarios, it's simple is not always easy, right? It's
Yeah.
about, I think it's again, it's those small changes. Like, what's the one thing that I can do? Can I let go of the critique one round earlier?
Mhm.
Right. Or if I'm managing up, can I get them to let go of um the formatting on this one specific slide because I explained to them that getting this one slide aligned is going to take 8 hours of work, and that's going to keep the person from being able to do these 10 other slides that are out there. Like, what is that one seemingly small, but it's the beginning, right? Like, it's with everything's a lot of so many things in life start with these small little micro things.
Right. Yeah. Finding what feels more low stakes than everything else, and
Yeah.
seeing if you can let that go. And
Yeah.
then just seeing how you feel.
Yeah. And then, like, I think that I'm looking at some of our notes as we were prepping for the conversation, like, what is it? The quote that came up through that was, done is better than perfect, and sometimes good is brilliant. So
Yeah.
that's one. But the other one, I have the daily calendar from Seth Godin for this year. And one of the recent items, I collect the ones that are resonant or I know that are going to be a topic. So this one says from Seth Godin, shipping our work is a chance to be seen, to learn, to own it, and to do better next time. So I love that framing because, if I'm trying to let go or I'm trying to encourage someone else to let go, whether it's a person above me or below me, let's just get it done and we'll do better next time. Because
Yeah.
that continuous improvement mindset, it's like, I'm not saying that perfection isn't what we strive for. I'm saying maybe we won't get it perfect. The reality is you'll never get it perfect, if we're honest, but like maybe we won't get it perfect this time. Maybe we'll get it perfect next time.
Yeah, it's the iteration and the continuous improvement, and progress over perfection
Progress
is
over
it
perfection
yeah, is
every
another
time.
quote.
Every time. Every time. It's every day a little bit better. Every day a little bit better. And as long as you're working with human beings, I don't think there is really truly a perfection. It's just the best that we can do today. The
Yeah,
best
for
that we can do
sure.
today. Amanda, thank you for joining me on this one. I know this is a tough one for both of us to talk about sometimes, or like acknowledge, like ill perfectionist,
Right.
or
Oh
like
yeah, I'm like
struggling.
that sometimes.
Yeah. But I appreciate the candor. I appreciate the advice that you shared with everyone, and I trust that our listeners have gotten something good out of this one. So, and I hope y'all will join us next time when we cover another topic from the messy middle. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks for taking time with us in the messy middle. Word of mouth remains the most powerful way for people to find us. If this episode sparked something for you, we'd love it if you'd subscribe to the podcast on your favorite app, download a few episodes, and share it with someone else who's navigating the in between. Do you have ideas for future episodes or topics you'd like us to explore? You can find our feedback form at themessymiddlematters.com or in the show notes. Thank you for joining us on this journey. This work is better when we do it together. Until next time.